this inflection point of character and trust and feeling valued, it's not for better or for worse. It's not going to come down to this bonus check. Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story, which I'm going to put off for just 1 second because it occurred to me I wanted to do a shout out to a friend of the show, Joe Natoli.
Oh, yes.
Had posted on his Facebook, and I've been in touch with him about his battle with COVID, been hospitalized, came home. It was a very serious situation. He is thankfully home and seems to be doing better. Came home with an oxygen tank, as I understand.
Yeah, I was going to say better, but not like I came home and now everything is great by any stretch of the imagination.
No. And while he shared this on his Facebook page and story, so I'm not revealing anything that he wouldn't want said. Don't need to get into it, but I do want to first of all send out our thoughts and well wishes to him, and then remind people, to the extent anyone needs reminding, that, as he said, look, he was very cautious. He was not going out to bars and
right.
packed events without a mask. He was taking precautions to socially distance, and still had a very rough time. So I would just remind our listeners to value each other, value themselves, and to be careful. So with that said, get better, Joe. With that said, here's my story. As we've talked about, both of us run small businesses. I've always, at this time, as the calendar turns the corner into November, start thinking about all the year-end planning. And one of the things that I think about are bonuses. We've been fortunate that we've been able to provide year-end bonuses for many years running. It's not every year in our history, but almost every year in our history, and they vary with the kind of year we had. This year, needless to say, is different.
But this year is different? Has this been an unusual year?
I can expand on that if you'd like, for those of you not aware.
Oh my God.
This year is different, and it's not that we wouldn't have some ability to pay out bonuses, because we do. And in saying that, I know that we're incredibly fortunate, because there are a lot of businesses out there for which this is just not a question.
Right.
But here's the issue. Number one, if we did pay out bonuses, they would be markedly smaller than in prior years. And not just because 2020 has been a far cry from 2019, but also because even if we had the same amount of available cash on hand that we did at the end of 2019, the difficulty of forecasting what kind of cash reserves we need in 2021.
Yeah. That's where my mind was going. It's like, it almost feels like not that is a hoarding mentality, because it's a very smart thing in business to be conscious of cash. Most small businesses are cash is king, as they say,
yes.
That everything comes back to cash. But it is that hoarding behavior comes from that a base level fear of, will I need this later? Will I have enough at a future point?
Right.
And
so
I think we're all feeling that.
Yeah. And so there are a number of things that are going through my mind. Number one, it's very important to me to treat the people who work for my firm, who have given so much and performed incredibly well under obviously trying circumstances.
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to give them a bonus to the maximum extent that I can. They've had their trials and tribulations this year, and I'd love to be able to provide them with a bright spot in an otherwise trying year. A second consideration, just as you said, is what's the business going to need? What's the smart thing to do with available resources for the business for 2021? And then within all of that and making those decisions, how do you communicate so that you not only manage expectations, but you make sure that people feel valued, even though, unlike past years, it may not be valued. They may not feel that way because of the financial
Right.
results of the holiday season. And the last part of it that I'll say is the reason I'm bringing this up now is because traditionally, I haven't given out bonuses around Christmas time. I know that they were, at least in this country, called, Christmas bonuses.
Mhm.
But
You
I
giving
always
out
thought,
hams or
yeah,
turkey?
hams, turkeys. I always thought that if you're giving out bonuses, which we did, I kind of set Thanksgiving as our benchmark because number one, I thought that if you're giving out extra money, people could use it during the holiday season so that when
Sure.
they go shopping, they would have it on hand. And number two, I thought it made sense because the message I'm sending is that I'm thankful for them. I'm
Yeah.
thankful for everything they did. And that's why I timed the bonuses around Thanksgiving. So all that's been swirling around in my mind. And then we had a recording schedule. So I'm like,
Right.
this is where I do my brain dump.
I was
And
going to
that's
say,
my
I was like,
story.
so basically this episode is about helping you make a decision.
It's therapy. I like to think of it as therapy. So with that, I'll
Perfect.
just lie back on the couch and
Right.
go.
So there's so many things here because, and as you can feel, I think they're all valid. They're all important. It's not like you're making up stories about things, and a lot of them are unknowns. I mean, I think that when I have been part of these conversations in the past about this, I think one place I like to start, and I'd be curious if this helps at all, is right now you just listed out all those variables about like why to, why not to, as if they are all equal. And I don't just mean which ones are more important, but also without any discernment about I know what I want to say. I just can't think how to say it. Like the level. Here, I'll say it this way. If I over dramatize, this is a thing I do all the time. If I haven't, I'm sure I've done this on the episodes before. But if I over dramatize the numbers of a thing to make a point, I start to see distinctions. So, for instance, if you're talking about a $5 bonus, that $5 is not going to, in 2021, make or break whether you have to lay people off or furlough your staff or whatever. So therefore, you could probably swing a $5 bonus. If it's 75 grand, that could keep somebody on staff for quite a while in 2021. And so those are both, way far ends of the spectrum. And so getting a sense of is this of a I can almost think of the order of magnitude. That's the phrase I was looking for. Is the order of magnitude of what you would be preserving now, will it be substantive to whether it would affect layoffs or holding people in whatever? Because that then starts to divvy out whether or not like a lesser amount. And then we even get into, do people need that money to feel valued? Like if, so I think there's a bunch of different ways to look at it.
There are, that's right. It's, we're not in a place where that's the bonuses are enough to determine whether we keep the lights on or not, or whether or not somebody loses their job. But it is a real cushion for us. Similarly, if I knew that every single one of my employees had $1 million sitting in their checking account, would I find a different way to value them? Then yes, I would. I would definitely reinvest all of the money into the business. And that's an important distinction. It's not, I also don't say, well, I, as the owner of the business, get all of this stuff. And then regardless of whether I give out a bonus to them, a lot of times I've given out bonuses and I haven't taken anything. So yeah, if I didn't think the dollars meant anything real to them, that they would get just as much, they would feel just as valued if I put in, I know this sounds trite, but if I actually put in a meaningful, like a handwritten note telling them what my thoughts were, if I thought that to them, each one would be valuable.
You don't mean compliment them, do you, Eliot?
I compliment them. Yeah, they don't have, there's no problem with complimenting them.
Just don't give me a note back.
Yeah, don't give me a note back. I'd prefer not. But yeah, then I would save all the money. If I had my druthers, I would save all the money to reinvest in the business.
Right. And so I think, one of the ways I've seen, and depending on the size of the business that you're determining, like this is not possible for larger businesses or larger organizations. With smaller ones, I think it is. I've seen some people give their folks a choice. like would this matter, or just involve them in the conversation about like, because sometimes I think there's a supposition that, no one's ever disappointed to get money. I'm not suggesting that people are upset about it, but assuming that they won't feel valued if they don't get the dollars in a year where they clearly know finances are tricky or at best uncertain is a bit of a leap. It's a bit of an assumption that may or may not be true. And it could be that they would feel just as valued with, a week's vacation, or, a couple extra days vacation, or I don't know, like other things that don't necessarily cost you dollars as much.
Look, I know that Lacey really wants, and this is not a joke, not a lie, she wants Wagenheim Law trucker hats. I know. I'm perfectly serious. You can talk to her after this.
Oh my God.
Recording. Yeah, that's not happening. But I will give you an example. So
we're going to have to go back to why that's not happening. Why would you not do that just for the fun of it? So, I'm a little disappointed in you, Eliot.
Yes, well, so, but I will talk about where the money does not make a difference. To give you an example, we represented a number of families from the United States Naval Academy pro bono, because they had reserved and paid a lot of money in cases, $5,000 and $10,000 to reserve accommodations for commissioning week. And commissioning week did not happen because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And a number of these landlords had refused to give any of the money back. Oh. And so we took on a number of these families as clients pro bono to either negotiate or file suit and represent them to trial, because I thought they had given so much to the country. Mm-hmm. In one case, they had two daughters, one at Naval Academy, one at West Point.
Wow.
So we had done that. And so on two of the occasions, the families had started sending us more than one, like $100 Amazon gift cards. Aww. To thank you, at various milestones, another gift card, whatever. And I appreciated that. But we didn't need it. I know they wanted to express their thanks, and I appreciated the thought behind it. But as you well know, you don't need the $100. That's
right. I think you're kind of making a point I was trying to dig into is, like I said, I feel I need to caveat this every time. No one's ever upset that they've got some cash, but I do think there's a mistake in assuming that is the only way people feel valued.
Yeah.
That there are a number of ways that I think you can make somebody feel valued. Now there's, with employees, it's a little more tricky, because especially, and we did a whole episode on this, I believe, or at least part of one. If bonuses have begun to feel like, if there's like a formula for how they get calculated and they come at a certain time of year and people they're depending on it, they're counting on it. Part of their annual planning is they're expecting that money at the end of the year. That's a different story. If you've created that kind of expectation, then it's a whole different conversation. If they really are these sort of surprise, not always there, different values each time, then I think you're in a little bit of a different place, but it doesn't change the fact. Here's the thing we can't know. No one has ever been at the end of a year like this year.
Yeah, and the employees are certainly well aware, in terms of tempering their expectation. Again, unless there's a formula involved and they've been planning on this, it would come as a shock to nobody to announce, just like you laughed at it, hey, this has been an unusual year. Nobody's going to really react in shock.
No. I had a client who their typical raises, their compensation increases, or were in September typically, and they wrung their hands over announcing that they weren't going to do an across the board. They did pick out a few certain people who had really gone, just, there were some exceptions where they felt like it was necessary strategically to adjust a couple people, but across the board they didn't. And they were so worried that people were just going to be up in arms about it, because they do it every year. It's at this time. There's, people had this expectation, and they definitely got a couple people who were upset, but a good number of the people were like, we're just really happy we still have jobs. Like,
Right.
we were not expecting that. And so I think I will always default to this. I think the, honest and transparent conversation, because like you said, if you are saying, guys, there's just not enough to really spread it around this year, and then you go buy a Maserati with,
Right. Right.
then,
No, that's true. Yeah.
which you have every right to do. It's your business. Like, you can choose to do that, but at the risk of people feeling not valued, because what you've said is, I had resources and I decided not to use them on you. and
Right.
I didn't put them in the business. I spent them
decided to use them just on me.
for
And
fun.
you're
Yeah.
right. I'd have every right to do that, and that would break faith
It
with
would break faith,
the
right?
employees.
If you have gone to them and said, sorry, there's just not enough. Now, if you
Right.
didn't say anything and you just did it, I mean, that's a little different, maybe.
Maybe, but I have
yeah.
a feeling that that wouldn't be their first glimpse into character.
Probably not. But that's the whole point, though, of, this inflection point of character and trust and feeling valued. It's not, for better or for worse, it's not going to come down to this bonus check. Like, they're feeling valued, right, is a mosaic. It's a fabric of a lot of different threads, like trucker hats, but whatever, I won't harp on that.
Yes, you will.
Oh, I'm gonna.
I mean, whether the mics are on or whether the mics are off, you're going to be harping on the trucker hats.
Totally. I'm like, I might just be buying trucker hats for Lacey because I love the idea of it. Anyway, the feeling valued, not that this question you're asking is an important one. I think it's super important. And I don't know if it is as linchpin as it feels necessarily. It might be, but.
Well, I think that where I've started to come down was really on your point, where financial compensation is not the main way to make them feel valued. So the decision tree for me is, okay, well, what's the purpose of the bonuses? Because just like if they're $5 bonuses, whatever, the purpose of the bonuses is not necessarily to make sure that our people can pay their mortgage or pay their rent or put food on the table. They don't use them for planning. It's not formulaic. So it's not cutting into what they perceive their income was going to be. So the purpose of the bonuses for us is not only to reward great performance, but also to say thank you, and to make people feel valued. And so when I say, well, can I say thank you? Can I make people feel valued while still preserving most of our cash resources for the great unknown that is 2021? And so I've come down on, yes, I do plan on doing something financially, but also looking at more personalized gifts or something like that, that I could really think about, that I know people like or whatever. And I haven't gotten any farther than that. But just kind of in thinking, how can I express this, which isn't just here's an extra month's pay or something like that.
Right. So there's two things that when you were just talking that came up, because I think one, well-intentioned but still a mistake that a lot of leaders can make, is stretching themselves. They want people to feel valued. They value people feeling valued. They don't want people worried or stretched too thin. So they overextend themselves to go ahead and give the kind of bonus that they would in a normal year, and then set themselves up for a very tricky 2021 in a time of unknown. I just want to quickly make that point that is also irresponsible. It's not, it in a weird way, it's not showing them they're valued, because you've actually now put them a little bit at risk. And so there's
so
that
if you give
side.
out a normal bonus and then, January 31st or February 15th or whatever, come back and say, hey, look, we're going to have to take 20% pay cuts across the board.
Right.
That's a lot worse, because they may have taken these bonuses as exactly what they are, which is extra money where they could spend for something that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten, and now they're going to take a hit. So yeah.
Right. I do have one, because we talked about this one other time. There's a weird lower point to bonuses where it starts to feel silly. Like if you did give a $5 bonus, if you gave them a $5 gift card or something, you almost are like, okay, why did I, like you almost maybe shouldn't do it.
Right.
But what I have seen done really well a couple times is if you know your people well enough to do this, it can work really well. If not, it doesn't. But for instance, if you gave me $100 Visa card, that would just go in my pocket for whatever. Mm-hmm. If you gave me $100 card to like Sweetwater or Guitar Center, like, because those are things that I don't indulge and spend. Like, it's a thing that I consider sort of indulgent if I want to get another, piece of musical equipment of some kind that I'm like, oh, I don't really need that. But if you give me a gift card specifically to that, I'm like, well, I got to spend it at Guitar Center. So I'm going to buy. Like I had when I was running that company a couple of years ago, there was a woman who worked for me, and it was a very tightly run company. There was not a lot of money to do anything like that, but she'd been such a big help. I knew she loved to knit, and people who knit and darn, they are always like wanting more yarn than they have, but it's like an indulgent thing because they already have a lot and whatever. And so I got her a gift certificate to this place that has all these really cool yarns, and she was so excited because that meant it gave her permission to spend money in a way that felt really indulgent. And I think that can feel really extra good. And then it's less about the dollars than it is the sort of experience that you're giving somebody.
Well, so that I think is really the point. I'm so glad we had this conversation. So this is really, so regardless of the listeners, let's forget about the listeners. This has really helped me personally.
It's really for Eliot.
I appreciate, I certainly value everybody listening in, but really this is all about me and what shouldn't
Well, it is called, So Here's My Story.
My story.
It's my story.
But I think you're right. I think that the focus really on the bonuses that I'm going to be turning my attention to is more experiential than financial, because that's and not as some sort of cop-out or an excuse, but because of the situation in which we now find ourselves, I really want to focus on another metric for meaningful, other than the dollar signs, which I'd been using before.
Yeah, this one's a very like acutely specific example, but I think it starts like when you really think about a person and what they need, or what would really be valuable to them. And of course, this goes back way pre-COVID. A client of mine had care. This wasn't from an employer, it was from a friend, but the point still sticks. She had an elderly parent staying in their house who needed a ton of care, and they were swapping back and forth taking care of it, which meant that they never had like evenings or weekends. They couldn't easily go out to dinner. They couldn't because the elderly parent needed to be looked after all the time. And so a friend of hers got her, and I don't know exactly how this worked, but like a block of hours from a home healthcare nurse person who they could call and schedule to come over, like respite care. They call it respite care. So the person can come over and spend a Friday evening so that they can go out to dinner. And they desperately needed to get out and have some not responsible time. And it wasn't a ton of money at all. Like it really wasn't a ton of cash, but it was one of those things. They could have hired somebody to come in, but it felt indulgent. They felt a little bit bad for wanting to leave her and go out. And there's a lot wrapped up into it. So they created that experience, that ability for them to do that. Now, obviously that's super specific. You wouldn't buy that for your whole team, but those are the ways, if you sort of think, what do I know about this person and what would matter to them? What would they, where would they spend money on themselves that they wouldn't normally? I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but I had a client tell me that in their onboarding forms, there's a question on there that says, if you had $100, if you found $100, what would you spend it on? And they use that for moments, not so much like holiday bonuses, but if they ever want to reward an employee or something, because not everybody loves massages or flowers or whatever it is. So they have this little sense of like, where would that person blow it at a bookstore or? Well,
but I love that. And I actually wrote a note while you were talking about if somebody who's running a company is listening to this and thinking, well, geez, that sounds like a good idea, but I don't know my people well enough. And that may be a to-do, something for 2021 to say, okay, well, how can I get to know my people well enough so that hopefully the financial consideration won't be in the offing at this time next year. Right. But if I wanted to do something that really catered to them that they'd find meaningful, would I be able to know what that is? And if the answer is no, then maybe that's a to-do.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah. So before, I know that we can wrap up this episode, but before we go, I do want to give a shout out to another listener.
So you're going to bookend shout outs?
Yes.
Oh,
Michelle
yes.
Fewer, 3rd degree black belt. Amazing.
3rd degree black belt. That is a major accomplishment. I mean, that is, and I was fortunate enough that I got to watch some of it via Zoom, and it was extraordinary. There was like the last final bit of it. People were cheering her on as she finished this last bit. And I'm not even ashamed to admit, I got a little misty eyed. It was really thrilling.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Michelle.
Congratulations, Michelle. She contributes a lot to our Facebook group, which I hope more and more people do. But it also taught me that as much as she contributes to the Facebook group, I should keep in mind not to mess with Michelle.
Don't mess with
Michelle.
She can mess you up.
She could mess me up.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Eliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.